Welcome, everyone, to Coleman Report Live, April 16th edition. Huge news today. We have Mr. John Riosti, the American Banker reporter. How you doing, John?
Doing good. Thank you. Thank you,
Welcome.
Joseph.
We have Lance and Katie Watucky. Before we get into the big news, we have some poll questions, and then we'll let Lance and John take it away. But let's do a quick poll of how successful were you in actually getting your applications into E-Tran before the portal was shut down?
Well, last night it was kind of come and go. People started getting messages last night that it was approved subject to funding. But then I was still getting loans through last night and was able to get a number of funding numbers today, Joe. So it worked until 9:30 a.m. Central Time.
For you guys on the phones, 85% were successful, and we have a huge audience today. So the more important question is what we asked yesterday during our webinar is what percentage were you actually able to get through with a fund ID? These numbers look pretty good. So for you guys on the phone, 70%, say over 50% were successful. Lance and John, take it away. Is the program is shut down this morning as of 5 a.m. SBA announced. John, you want to give us a quick update?
Well, there's not much. I'm sorry. There's not much updating to give beyond that. It looks like the impasse will not be healed today or taken care of today. So it's going to be a multi-day shutdown. Hopefully this weekend. Hopefully it won't be too long. And begin to remind people of the government shutdown of last year. But it just seems that there's some more negotiating to do, and until then, everything is now sort of brought to a halt, and at least with entering loans and that part of the program, and maybe bankers can take a little bit of a pause.
One of the things that's absolutely stunning, John, if you go back and look at the last 15 days since the PPP program's been in place, we've averaged about $20 billion a day. Banks across America, which 2 days equals 1 year in a normal 1 year for SBA. Absolutely stunning that, I didn't believe that 350 would be used up in 2 weeks, which begs the question, John, how much money do we need in this new appropriation?
More than $250 billion. If it's $250 billion, it's a stopgap. I was on a call yesterday with Richard Hunt, who is the president and CEO of the Consumer Bankers, and he threw the number out of $1 trillion, just a nice round $1 trillion.
Well,
and that perhaps not that much, but certainly more than $250 billion.
John, and I've talked to a number of lenders throughout the country, and I just know my perspective at our bank. We all have enough loans in the queue, not just our bank, but banks across the country, to eat up that 250 in probably a matter of a week.
Yeah, it's we were talking a little bit before that probably is the reason why SBA chose to just shut E-Tran down with regard to paycheck protection, because if people kept uploading loans, they just said it probably would have exploded the system.
Yeah, what would have happened if let's just say Monday there's more money? You would have had 3.5 days of applications being submitted, queued up, ready to go. I don't know how E-Tran has been working incredibly well this week, much better than when this first started, thanks to Amazon getting involved. But I think the crazy part of it is if you had 3.5 days worth of applications, I shared with John earlier, it'd be like sticking your thumb in a hole on a dam on a reservoir when it's raining, monsoon rains coming down. Once you pulled your finger out, the dam would give way, and the same thing would happen to E-Tran. There would literally be thousands of queued up applications, and if they put funding in there, it'd just be oof. I think it would be and I'm not sure of that. I'm not a technology wizard, but I do think it might be problematic for E-Tran if there were that many applications queued up ready to go.
Yeah. There's one issue I wanted to bring up with regard to why we're in the shutdown. What are the sticking points between the two parties? Some of them are broader than PPP. They go beyond it, and sort of PPP is being held hostage to disputes about funding for state and local governments and hospitals and things like that don't pertain directly to PPP. But there is an issue that does, and that is some congressional Democrats and some banking groups as well would like to see some of the new, if I can call it that, of these future funds we've been talking about sort of earmarked for small banks, earmarked for certain populations that have had trouble, supposedly had trouble, getting access to the first round of PPP funding. And it's interesting the different takes of the trade groups because, some ICBA came out with a letter yesterday saying that they would like to see a certain portion. I think they said, I forget whether it's 25 billion or 25% of the monies designated for small banks. But other groups, most notably CBA, don't want any part of that. They say this program is tough enough to administer and it's complicated enough as it is, and that adding those type of parameters would just, bring it to sort of move it towards an unwieldy status as it goes forward. So if you were wondering why all of a sudden things are on the sideline, those are a few of the reasons.
My personal opinion, John, is it's been working incredibly well. We wouldn't have been able, as a group of participant bankers, to get $20 billion a day worth of loans done.
Right.
The current system works. It just needs more money.
Right. Yeah. Certainly when this is said and done, it will go down as one of the more remarkable examples of government, maybe the most remarkable example of a working public-private partnership. Because you're right, after a bumpy start, things have smoothed out to a considerable degree, but they have these discussions about what to do going forward.
John, I included your article on fintechs. Do you think them being part of the program accelerated the process to an extent that was what got us through the funds so quickly?
I think it did, but perhaps, I was thinking about that, Joseph, not as much as we might have thought, because it made big news when the first fintechs, and I know it was, Square was one of them, and PayPal was another. When those first two were approved, we certainly wrote about it then. Mm-hmm. But it just took several days for others to come online, and Funding Circle and Bluevine, a couple others that were, very eager to get online, finally got approval yesterday. So bad timing for them, but they will be ready to do it when kick into gear when things go forward. So yes, to an extent, but perhaps not to the extent people perhaps thought.
Give us an update. You've asked me and Lance a couple times about credit unions and their inactivity of participation.
It's hard to so far for me to make any industry-wide comments. I've asked for information from SBA about, the breakdown of who the lenders are, institutionally wise. They're, for all the talk about fintechs, the number I heard of how many, might ultimately become direct lenders is still what some might call a handful, 20 out of right now. There are just under 5,000 PPP lenders. If you add a couple of the non-bank SBA lenders that would have had presumptive approval to start, that brings it up to maybe 35 non-banks, non-depositories, and then you've got roughly 4,950 banks and credit unions. What the makeup is, but what has surprised me is some of the very biggest credit unions are on the sidelines, and some of them, definitely, do business funding and have been interested in doing more of it, but they've stayed on the sidelines so far. You probably have to, acknowledge the fact that the vast majority of credit unions weren't SBA lenders and had no real connection to the program, so it would have been tough for them to jump in. But I've been surprised at how many large, fairly sophisticated rather, and certainly institutions with ample capital have not participated in PPP credit unions.
Well, we finally got guidance this morning from SBA, the release that you can e-sign and e-consent and scan documents. That might have been a big holdup for a lot of these guys, right? I know, Lance, you were quick to get the tech done, but a lot of lenders couldn't do what your bank was able to do, it seems like.
Well, that's one of the things, John, that, again, I'm surprised the larger credit unions did not participate. If a bank has adequate resources, they can set up, electronic application process. Our institution, every application was electronic. Customer clicked on a link, upload, pre-filled out electronic forms, uploaded all their information. That information was reviewed electronically, 2 times input to E-Tran. The whole process was electronic and certainly works well with e-signature, scanned copies of applications, which we've been working with. But it's I think if you're processing these the old school way with a hard copy application, it just takes longer. It takes longer. You need an electronic way of processing these.
We just got a question. Thanks, Bill. Let me start to interrupt. He says, as a credit union, we have participated and continue to participate. The lack of guidance made it difficult to process applications. We've heard that all week, Bill. Go ahead, John.
Well, yeah, and that's what I did want to say. I wanted to add some stuff to be fair to the credit unions that haven't participated. They have done a number of things in a number of different areas. They have donated massive amounts of money. Some of them have, 1 or 2 that I saw have partnered with their local governments to create much smaller scale loan programs just locally. But on the other hand, this is the biggest game in town. This has been just a huge story nationally, and I think it will have very long-reaching ramifications. And some of the bigger credit unions chose not to, but the ones, certainly the ones that are in there, and there are a number of ones that are in there. They just, from my very unscientific work so far, they tend to be on the smaller, relatively small compared to the largest credit unions. They've been very active, just like the banks. But I just wonder how it's going to be proportionally when you look at proportional numbers. Base them on the number of banks and the number of credit unions.
And just to confirm, we have a question saying, as of 10 a.m. Central, the funds have dried up. And Lance, you're in Arkansas. I mean, I think you said the last one was around 9:30 a.m. this morning.
It's right around 9:30 a.m. Central Time.
Okay.
When I was no longer when I got to a point in E-Tran where if I went in and attempted to select Paycheck Protection Program, it would not allow you to do so.
We are going to do the second round of funding. We expect the funds to be there by Monday, and we're going to do another webinar next week, backed by popular demand. Lance did a great job yesterday. We had a huge crowd, and I know you guys want to get in while you can in the second round. So any last comment? Sorry, Katie, we haven't brought you in. What are you writing for tomorrow for Fraud Friday?
Well, I've started to work on one about a farmer, but I'll probably cover that in detail tomorrow.
Tomorrow, okay.
Yeah.
Hey, you know, I learned something new about farmers, Katie. I had not realized that there's a Schedule F on a tax return for
Yeah,
farmers. Until working the Paycheck Protection Program loans, I did not realize there was a Schedule F, and maybe I just haven't worked enough farm loans. I've done a large number of poultry loans in my history, never seen a Schedule F until working Paycheck Protection Program loans.
Well, one last question. Oh, go ahead, Katie.
I was saying, I'm sure there's a lot of new industries that a lot of people lenders just aren't used to lending to, that all of a sudden you're hearing about them coming out of the woodwork right now because of this.
Well, and I think the other thing about PPP that's been interesting, and I've shared with y'all, the number of church deals, the nonprofit educational businesses, it's been kind of amazing. There have been a lot of new types of businesses that I've had the opportunity to work on and help as a result of PPP.
Would you say, though, that the biggest segment is construction? That's what SBA has reported.
That's SBA reported that. They reported by NAICS code where the loans were. Now, in my walk, construction, I've seen some construction loans, Joe. I think the thing about the construction company loans is they were large. They were larger.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just look at numbers of loans, tons of hospitality loans, the thing that's interesting to me is the sole proprietors and independent contractors did not see as many of those as I expected, probably because those applications came in later than the others.
Right.
John, we're great question from, let me get this, for Brian. He says you should flood your representatives, your congressman, with requests for more funding. I'll give you the last comment, John.
Well, the interesting thing, what CBA was hoping for, and what others were hoping for, was what they called a clean bill. Just allocate the money, and unfortunately, that's not what happened. It got tied up with other issues. I don't think any member of Congress would have voted against a clean bill. It would have been 100 to nothing in the House and 435 to nothing or 438 to nothing, whatever the official membership of the 100 to nothing in the Senate and about 435 to nothing in the House. There's no one who opposes this. It's just it gets tied up in other things and they have to work it out. So they're important issues.
Well, Lance, one more thing, and this is actually really, thank you, Thomas, but if you do not close the loan in 10 days, will the SBA de-obligate the funds?
I don't know how the SBA would know. I don't know what the repercussions. It was 5 days. It got moved to 10 days. Of course, I don't know why you can't get it closed in 10 days or less. And there's limited documentation that you're going to need to close the loan. There are no appraisals, no environmentals, no personal guarantees, no UCC searches, no filing of mortgages. These are basically unsecured, unguaranteed loans. There's not much so I mean, you should be able to get it closed and funded within 10 days, but I've not seen, I've just seen the guidance that SBA extended it to 10 days. I didn't see if there were any repercussions if you don't meet that 10-day requirement.
Well, join us tomorrow. We're going to be on, and we'll be on every day at 1 p.m. Eastern. Join us next week on Wednesday for our webinar. John Riosty, thank you so much for your comments. We appreciate your time. Lance, we appreciate your time. And we'll see everyone tomorrow. Thank you, Katie. Bye.
Thank you. Have a good day.